There's a question that most people never have the courage to ask themselves. If there is a God who created everything, if that God is generous, abundant, unlimited, if that God creates nothing broken or defective, why are you still living in scarcity? I'm not talking about extreme poverty. I am talking about that permanent feeling that there is never enough, that the month always ends before the paycheck does, that you work, you push, you try, but you never arrive where you imagined you would be by now. That scarcity has a name, and it is not lack of opportunity. It is not lack of effort. It is not bad luck. Napoleon Hill spent more than 20 years studying the wealthiest men in history, trying to answer exactly that question. And what he discovered is going to change the way you see every area of your life. Because the block is not where you think it is. It never was. And when you understand where it truly is, you will not be able to ignore it for a single moment. In 1908, Napoleon Hill sat across from the richest man in the world, Andrew Carnegie, the owner of a steel empire worth the equivalent of $300 billion in today's values. And Carnegie did something no one expected. He looked at that young journalist and said he had discovered something no book had ever documented until that point. Something that separated the men who built empires from the men who spent their entire lives working for those empires. And it was not what most people would assume. It was not ambition. It was not above-average intelligence. It was not connections or a wealthy family. It was something that operated from within, something invisible to the naked eye, but absolutely determinant in every external result. Carnegie called it the mental law of wealth, and he asked Hill to spend the next 20 years documenting that law, interviewing the 500 most successful men in history, discovering how it worked. Hill accepted, and what he found at the end of those 20 years is what you need to understand right now. Because he did not find a business formula, he found something far deeper, something that connects spirituality, the mind, and wealth in a way that most people have never truly stopped to consider. You have probably had that moment, that quiet moment, usually at night, when the house is still and you are alone with your own thoughts, and you start running the numbers in your head. What comes in, what goes out, what is left over, and the answer is never the one you wanted. And then the question arrives, why? You are not lazy. You work, you try, you have taken courses, read books, tried to invest, tried to build something. So why? Why do some people seem to attract opportunities naturally while you have to fight for every cent? Why do some people build wealth with what looks like little effort while you give everything you have and barely hold on to what you already have? Have you ever wondered if something is wrong with you? If you were born without whatever it is that others seem to have? If wealth is meant for some people, but simply not for you? That thought is more common than you realize, and it is also the most destructive thought that exists, because it is built on a premise that is completely false. And Napoleon Hill spent 20 years proving that premise is false, with data, with documented cases, with real names and real stories of people who started from absolute zero and built extraordinary wealth, and every single one of them discovered the same thing. The problem was never out there. Napoleon Hill was a methodical man. Trained as a journalist, he did not accept claims without evidence. But after 20 years of interviewing the most successful man on the planet, he arrived at a conclusion that surprised even himself. Every single one of them, without exception, made reference to something beyond themselves, not necessarily within a specific religion, not with the same vocabulary, but every one of them acknowledged the existence of what Hill came to call infinite intelligence, a higher creative force, abundant by its very nature. And what Hill observed is that this force does not operate through scarcity. It has no limitation. It does not distribute opportunities to some and deny them to others. It is available to any mind that knows how to connect to it. And here's the point that changes everything. Connecting to that intelligence is not a passive religious act. It is an active mental act. Hill wrote about this with surgical precision. He said that infinite intelligence can be reached through the subconscious mind, and that the subconscious functions as both a transmitter and a receiver of that force. When your mind is aligned, when it is clear, when it is operating through faith and specific desire, it connects to that source and begins attracting what you have been seeking. But when your mind is contaminated by fear, doubt, and beliefs of scarcity, the connection is broken, not because the source refused you, but because the receiver is not functioning. Think of a simple analogy. A radio antenna can pick up the right frequency, or it can be full of interference. The station is broadcasting regardless. The problem is never the transmission. It is always the reception, and that is exactly what happens with most people. Abundance is being transmitted, but the internal receiver is full of interference, and Hill spent 20 years discovering where that interference comes from. And the answer lives in two concepts he documented with a depth no one had reached before him. Hill identified that every person operates from a consciousness, and there are fundamentally two: poverty consciousness and wealth consciousness. And the difference between them is not in the bank account. It is in the filter through which you interpret the world. Poverty consciousness is not exclusive to people without money. There are people with high salaries who operate through poverty consciousness, and there are people with very little in their pockets who already operate through wealth consciousness. Because consciousness is not about what you have, it is about what you believe is possible for you. Now let me show you how these two consciousnesses work in real life. An opportunity appears. The person with poverty consciousness thinks, what if it goes wrong? I do not have enough capital. The market is difficult. Others are already doing this. Why would I succeed? The person with wealth consciousness thinks, how can I make this work? What do I need to learn? Who has already done this? Who could guide me? Same opportunity, completely different filters, and the filter determines the action, and the action determines the result. But where does that filter come from? Hill went deep into that question, and he discovered that the consciousness of scarcity does not appear from nowhere. It is constructed over years of exposure to beliefs, phrases, behaviors, and environments that normalize limitation. Think about your childhood. What kind of conversations about money did you hear at home? Were they conversations about possibility or about limitation? Did the people around you dream large, or were they cautious about any kind of ambition? Was money treated as something that flowed, or as something that was always running out? These questions matter because the developing human brain does not filter what it absorbs. It simply absorbs. And what is absorbed repeatedly becomes belief, and belief becomes consciousness, and consciousness becomes result. Hill documented a case that illustrates this with perfect clarity. A man who had grown up in a family of extreme scarcity received an unexpected inheritance. A sum that could have changed his financial life completely if managed with any wisdom. In less than 2 years, the money was gone, not because of bad luck, not because of dishonesty from others, but because the internal consciousness of that man had a ceiling, and when the external reality exceeded that ceiling, something inside him acted automatically to restore balance, the balance of the level he believed he deserved, and Hill drew a deeply unsettling conclusion from that. You will never sustain externally what you do not believe internally. Never. It does not matter how much money comes in. It does not matter how many opportunities appear. If the internal consciousness is calibrated for scarcity, it will find a way to confirm what it believes every single time. And that is why changing jobs, taking a new course, trying a new business, none of it changes the result permanently, while the consciousness does not change first, because you are trying to change the fruit without touching the root. Napoleon Hill used one of the most powerful metaphors ever written about the human mind, and it is simple enough for anyone to understand, but deep enough to change the way you see everything. He said the subconscious is like soil, and all soil has one fundamental characteristic. It does not choose what it grows. It simply grows whatever you put into it. Plant an oak seed and it grows an oak. Plant a weed and it grows a weed. The soil has no preference. The soil has no judgment. It simply obeys. And this is exactly how the subconscious functions. You plant thoughts of fear, of scarcity, of limitation repeatedly, and the subconscious grows them, not because it wants to harm you, but because that is the only function it knows, to grow what was planted. Now think about what that means for your life. Every time you thought, I cannot do this, you planted a seed. Every time you thought money is hard to get, you planted a seed. Every time you thought this is not for me, I was not born for this, who am I to have this? You planted a seed. And the subconscious grew every single one of them, faithfully, without questioning, without hesitating. And right now you are harvesting exactly what was planted over years of repeated thoughts. It is not punishment. It is not bad luck. It is mental agriculture. But here is what changes everything about this metaphor. The same soil that grew the weeds can grow wheat. The ground is not corrupted. It is simply full of the wrong seeds. And when you stop planting the wrong seeds and begin planting the right ones with consistency and patience, the soil responds every time, without exception. Hill documented this process in hundreds of cases. People who transformed poverty consciousness into abundance consciousness, not through luck or circumstance, but through a deliberate and consistent practice of planting new thoughts. And that practice has a name. Hill called it auto-suggestion, and it is the most misunderstood concept in his entire body of work. Most people hear auto-suggestion and think of positive affirmations repeated without conviction, motivational phrases stuck on the bedroom wall, forced optimism that never translates into any real result. But that is not what Hill discovered. What Hill documented is something completely different and far more powerful. Auto-suggestion, according to Hill, is the process of deliberate communication with your own subconscious. It is the tool through which you replace the wrong seeds with the right ones. It is the way to reprogram the filter through which you see the world. And he was very specific about how it works. Auto-suggestion does not operate through empty words. It operates through words loaded with emotion. That distinction is what separates the person who tries affirmations and gives up in 2 weeks from the person who genuinely transforms their consciousness over months. Hill wrote this with precision. The subconscious mind does not respond to words. It responds to feelings. And feelings are the language the subconscious understands. Think of it this way. If you write on a sheet of paper, I am abundant. Oh, but while writing, you are feeling fear, doubt, and disbelief. What you are communicating to the subconscious is not the words. It is the feelings. And the feeling you are transmitting is one of scarcity. So the soil keeps receiving the wrong seeds, even while you are trying to plant the right ones. But when you find a way to anchor the new thought to a genuine emotion, the subconscious receives a different instruction, and it begins working in a different direction. Now let me show you how the wealthiest men in history applied this in practice, because this is not theory. It is documented. Andrew Carnegie began each day with what Hill called a session of purpose. Before any meeting, before any decision, he spent time in silence reaffirming to himself not just what he was building, but feeling it as already built. not simulating false emotion, but finding within himself the real emotion of gratitude and certainty for something that was still in the process of being created. That process trained his subconscious to operate from abundance, to interpret the world through the filter of someone who had already arrived. And a subconscious that operates from abundance makes different decisions, sees opportunities that others walk past, acts with a confidence that draws others into the same frequency. Thomas Edison was another example that Hill documented in depth. Edison did not speak about the 10,000 failures as defeats. He called them discoveries. That was not promotional language. It was a deliberate instruction he gave his own subconscious. By calling each failure a discovery, he was planting in the mental soil the seed that any result, was useful information. And a subconscious that interprets failure as information never stops trying, because stopping makes no sense to someone who is simply collecting data. Now you need to understand what this means in practice, because Hill did not leave this concept at the abstract level. He documented the process with details that anyone can apply. And it begins with a premise that goes against everything most people were taught. Change does not begin with action. Change begins with the internal state that precedes the action. Most people wait for a result before they believe. The 5% believe before they have any result, and that difference in sequence changes everything. When you wait for the result to believe, you act with hesitation, with a part of yourself held back for the possibility of failure, and that hesitation is felt by others, by opportunities, by your own mind. But when you train the belief before having any external evidence, you act from a completely different place, with a confidence that does not depend on validation, with a clarity that does not waver at the first obstacle, with a persistence that others call stubbornness, but is in reality applied faith. And Hill identified 3 elements that make auto-suggestion work in a real and lasting way. The first is specificity. Wanting abundance in general is not enough. You need a specific objective with a number and a time frame. The subconscious does not work well with vague instructions. It works with clear ones. A vague instruction produces a vague response. A specific instruction produces a specific search. The second is repetition with emotion. The instruction needs to be repeated with consistency, not as a mechanical task, but as something you genuinely feel. Because the subconscious, as Hill identified, does not respond to the frequency of the words. It responds to the intensity of the feeling behind them. The third is patience with the process. Soil does not produce results the day after planting, and the subconscious does not either. Most people quit before the cycle completes itself. They plant for 2 weeks, see no result, and conclude it does not work. But the process is operating underneath the surface. Before any external change appears, internal changes are already happening. In the decisions you make almost without noticing, in the opportunities you begin to see that previously passed by, invisible, in the way you respond to what previously seemed like an obstacle. And then, when the external result appears, it seems sudden to those watching from outside. But for the person who lived the process, it was inevitable. Hill did not arrive at these conclusions through speculation. He arrived through direct observation of real people producing real results, and the cases he documented are the most powerful proof that these mechanisms work. Henry Ford did not have an advanced formal education. He grew up on a farm. He did not have significant starting capital. But Ford had something that the investors who rejected him did not have an absolutely unshakable wealth consciousness. When he announced he would produce the V8 engine in a single block, every engineer said it was impossible. The laws of physics did not allow for it. Ford ignored the engineers, not out of arrogance, out of internal conviction. He had planted in his own subconscious the instruction that it would be done. And for months, while engineers tried and failed, Ford repeated the same instruction: keep trying. And by the end of that year, the engine had been produced. Hill documented Ford's reaction to the result. He showed no surprise, because for Ford, the result was already a certainty before it existed in the physical world. It existed first in the soil of his subconscious. The physical world simply confirmed what had already been planted. Another case Hill documented is that of Jennings Randolph, a young man with no money, no connections, no apparent resources of any kind, but with a daily practice of auto-suggestion that Hill described as the most consistent he had ever documented. Randolph woke up every day and spent time in silence communicating to his subconscious not what he wanted to have, but what he already was. He described to himself, with detail and genuine emotion, the life he was building as if it were already his reality, not as a lie, as an instruction. Years later, Randolph was a United States Senator and one of the most influential men in the country. And when Hill interviewed him as an adult, Randolph said something that remained on record. He said the only moment he doubted the process was during the most difficult period, and that this was precisely the moment when most people stop, and that the only difference between him and the people who stopped was that he kept planning even without seeing the fruit yet. Now I need you to be completely honest with yourself, not the version of you that you present to the world, the version that exists when you are alone, when there is no one to impress, when there is no reason to appear confident. What do you truly believe about what is possible for you? Not what you say you believe, what you feel when you are alone and you think about the financial future you want. Do you feel that it is a matter of when, or do you feel that it is a fantasy that others reach, but you probably will not? Because that feeling is not random. It is the thermometer of your current consciousness. And if that thermometer is pointing towards scarcity, it is not because you are inferior. It is not because God overlooked you. It is because the soil of your subconscious is full of the wrong seeds. Seeds planted without intention. Seeds planted by others without you even realizing it. But seeds that you have the power to replace, starting today, if you choose to. Because this is the only choice that truly matters. Not the choice of which business to open. Not the choice of which investment to make. The choice of what kind of mental soil you are going to cultivate from this moment forward. Because as Hill discovered after 20 years and 500 interviews, everything begins there, always, without exception. Now you understand the three real blocks: poverty consciousness, which filters the world through limitation and confirms scarcity every single day. The subconscious full of the wrong seeds, faithfully growing what was planted over years without intention, and the absence of deliberate auto-suggestion, which is the only proven tool for replacing those seeds. God did not create you for scarcity. That is not a vague religious statement. That is what 20 years of research and 500 documented cases confirm. Abundance is not a privilege reserved for a chosen few. It is the natural state of a mind that operates without the interference of limiting beliefs. And every time someone builds real wealth, true wealth, with real consistency, it is not because the universe favored them. It is because at some point they began planting different seeds. with consistency, with patience, with the conviction that what was being planted would grow, even before seeing any evidence of it, and the soil responded, as it always responds. Without exception, the question that remains is not whether this works. Hill proved that it works. The question is when you are going to start planting. If this video made sense to you, if you recognized yourself in any part of what was said here, I want you to do one thing right now. Leave a comment below with one word, just one. The word that represents what you want to plant in your subconscious starting today. Abundance, freedom, purpose, growth, whatever word represents the soil you want to cultivate. Because the simple act of writing that word is the first deliberate seed, and most people who watch this video will not even do that. And that is exactly the difference between the 5% and the 95%. Not a grand decision. One small act of intention. If you want to keep going on this journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Because in the next video, I am going to show you what Hill called the most powerful method for accelerating the reprogramming of the subconscious, something he saw work in every single case he documented, and that fewer than 5% of the people who know this concept actually practice. Like the video, if you made it this far, that tells me it was worth your time. See you in the next one.